Hello, and welcome to this video webcast titled Preparing for What Comes Next, a conversation with HP's Chief Information Security Officer, brought to you by HP and IDG. My name's Tom Schmidt, Digital Content Director at IDG Strategic Marketing Services, and I'll be the host of today's webcast. Joining me is Joanna Burkey, the recently appointed CISO at HP. Joanna has held multiple management and security positions in her career at HP. She was also Global Head of Cyber Defense at Siemens. Hello, Joanna.
Hello, Tom. Thanks for having me today.
Also joining me is Bob Bragdon, Senior Vice President and Worldwide Managing Director of CISO here at IDG. Welcome, Bob.
Great to be here.
Bob, you and Joanna have a lot to discuss today, so let me pass it over to you to get started.
Sure. Thanks, Tom. Wonderful to be catching up with you, Joanna.
It's good to see you, Bob.
Yeah, you as well.
Through a Zoom screen. It's nice to see you.
Not how we used to interacting, but
I know.
work. There's so much going on in the industry, and this must be such a unique time to be in security. I have a bunch of things I want to get your thoughts on, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure if you're seeing this as well, but things just seem to be working better. Productivity's up. We're seeing project delivery is accelerated. Those inherent speed bumps in the physical environment seem to have evaporated to a certain extent. Why do you think that is, and what does it mean?
You know, I have also seen the same thing. And to me, it kind of comes down to we appear to be able to have a lot of focus right now with a lot of the distractions falling away to a degree, commute time being lessened, travel time being a non-factor. It's really interesting. I think we are focusing and being very execution oriented even more than normal. And I notice a big difference in availability, regardless of the person you're trying to reach, where they rank in the company they're at. We kind of have an equal playing field for accessibility right now. And I've really noticed that adds a lot to what we're able to accomplish.
A few months back, we had several industry CEOs stating that because of the shift to work from home, their organizations had accomplished years of digital transformation in just months. I think that's great news, but I worry about whether security can keep up. What do you think?
I also worry about whether security can keep up. And I honestly think, Bob, too, that these transformations can be a lever and an accelerator for security as well. I absolutely have some of the same concerns that things are moving so fast, security gets left behind. But I think we can and should also look at the opportunities that are possible with these work streams. With an increase in automation, with a focus on digitalization, I think it brings a lot of opportunity for cybersecurity organizations to bolt on to those work streams and thereby push and accelerate our own strategies across the company as well, while, of course, we pay attention to any aspects that might get left behind or any new weaknesses and exposures that are showing up because of those work streams.
Mm-hmm. Do you think not being in the office makes it more difficult, though, to understand what the different parts of the business are doing from a technology standpoint? We always worry about is security always playing catch up? Are they being brought in at the end of the process to go, okay, what's security like? Any security concerns? You go, well, wait a minute, you've been working on this for 18 months and this is the first we're hearing about it.
That's exactly right. I think we do lose something. We're missing the SBWA, the security by walking around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not being at home isn't a perfect remedy for that. With globalized workforces and things happening in a distributed manner anyway, this was never a guarantee. But I definitely do see that there is a loss of communication and a little bit loss of, the ability to just look around you and see the parallel things that need to be brought together, where cybersecurity might be a concern. I think in the spirit, again, of kind of looking at the plus side of the speed of business transformation, let's look at the plus side of this and say, well, we've now gone to the extreme where everything is distributed. If we as a security organization can figure out how to continue to shift left and move that needle left in this distributed environment, wow, we're really going to be set up well for the future with some sort of hybrid probably coming in the years to come.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. You and I have discussed the topic of resiliency before, and not so much like business continuity and disaster recovery, right? But rather that ability of the business to take a punch and keep on going.
Hmm.
In the wake of all this, that seems to be moving to center stage. What do you think it means for security?
It absolutely is in center stage. And I think I join a lot of other CISOs in this being one of the biggest things that we are constantly thinking about now, which is
Hmm.
how to even maintain some level of resiliency we had in the past, and even get to the point where we can think about growing it again. Right now it's just
Hmm.
a question of how do we get back to even.
Yeah.
And most of us have embraced and deployed defense in depth strategies. I believe in that very strongly. We know there are no magic bullets. And I feel like now I had all my depth taken out of my defense in depth. And I think, number one, acknowledging that and really getting tactical about where it happened, what can we do about it. For me, it has really highlighted the importance of having solutions and having products that can kind of pull double or triple duty and can help us in this regard. And I'll use HP SureClick security as an example of, you have a PC, it functions as a PC, that's the purpose of the PC,
Hmm.
but you also have embedded features and functionality in there that can help you with this resiliency problem, even if you didn't purchase the PC as a security tool to begin with. I think highlighting that need to really pay attention to your key providers and your key vendors and make sure they're taking security seriously and they're baking security in. It always was a best practice. But
Right.
now I feel like, this loss of depth and this impact to resiliency has really highlighted maybe calling that out as an actual tangible piece of your strategy going forward.
Hmm. Do you worry that, so we talk about building this in as part of your strategy. Do you worry that as time goes by, we just kind of forget about and fall back into our bad old ways, the way we've done it, that's gotten us into the point where a lot of technology we're buying doesn't have security built in. It's just not inherent in what we're acquiring, and then security has to go in and build it into their own ecosystem.
Hmm. I do, because I think it's our default. It's the mindset
Yeah,
we've
yeah.
been in really for, 2 decades now. And that's a lot of inertia to overcome.
Hmm.
And, I'll highlight again, I think this is where strategic relationships with your partners and really understanding who is in critical points in your supply chain, that's a big part of keeping this front of mind, because a really healthy ecosystem where multiple partners along the chain are all taking security seriously, it can really help in not putting all that load only on you as the CISO or only on the organization. You're sharing that load a little bit.
Hmm.
And, I'll highlight, I think having those relationships with strategic partners where we can lean on each other a little bit and you know, take advantage of partner services where we have customers right now who have partnered with HP's Print Security Analytics over the years, have
Hmm.
partnered with HP's Enterprise Security Services over the years. These relationships now really benefit those customers because there's somebody who's helping you along that path.
Hmm.
And, sitting here within HP, I definitely have my small set of partners that are helping me along. And I hope maybe that creates a dynamic that can keep going in the future because it's not all on you. Because I think you're right,
Yeah.
Bob. If it's all on you, we're going to so easily fall back into the way we've done it forever.
Yeah, and you need to have those relationships in place before bad things happen, right? I mean, that's one of the things that we've always watched is that something horrible happens, you get a breach or whatever happens, and then you're running out trying to find partners to work with. You need to have those relationships in place prior to that happening so you can pick up the phone and get that support that you need. God forbid that a bad thing happens, right?
You really do, because we see it every time. There's a serious breach, there's a serious incident, and all of a sudden you're on the phone to all the companies that can help.
Right.
When, you would be 200 yards down the foot race in that incident if there was an ongoing relationship with those
Hmm.
partners already. And I think, there is this is not to replace the more transactional, fungible relationships. Those are very important business engagements as well. But I think it's worth pointing out, look at your partner strategy, look at your partner ecosystem, and make sure you've got all those bases covered.
Yeah, good point. Good point to watch that partner ecosystem. So despite all the apparent progress, businesses are certainly under huge financial strain because of the economic slowdown. And that's probably going to continue for a while. But that usually leaves technology leaders scurrying to find value in tighter budgets. I'm hearing a lot of focus on utilization, kind of knowing what you have and getting more value out of the investments that you're making or ones that you've already made. How big a priority do you think that's going to be?
I think it's a massive priority to be able to do what you need to do with what you have. And, we mentioned earlier, certain products or solutions that can pull double or triple duty. I think that becomes more important. And, 15, 20 years ago, we were all talking about and using UTMs, right? They could check a lot of boxes together. And then, that became really unpopular because it's like, jack of all trades, master of none. Right. But technology has really matured in a lot of ways that you can get really good security features, functionality, and resiliency in technology where maybe the purpose of that technology is to do something else as its main goal. So I think being aware of what you've got and how to use it becomes even more critical right now. And I think too, it's, cybersecurity has always been about trade-offs. I would say there's very few programs out there that have ever been able to function at the level that they did everything they thought that they needed to do to secure the company. So we've always made trade-offs. I think now some of those trade-offs get deeper and broader. And we've got to get very realistic with our organizations and realistic with our business partners that we may have to do less with less. And how do you do that in the most optimized way possible?
Yeah, I think we've been a little spoiled, probably isn't the right word, but I know so many organizations where they're running 4 different DLP systems just because they either happen through acquisition or they just bought different ones, and they're all, they're paying the licenses and they're running these things. They don't have them turned on all the way. Each one maybe should have been resourced with 2 or 3 FTEs, and they get a half a person. It's beyond just the, trying to get value out of it. It's actually trying to use the technology correctly, because then that feeds into how do you get value out of it.
And Bob, I have found myself using that spoiled word a couple of times in the last months. Because, like I said, I think there's very few programs out there where you would talk to the CISO and they would say, oh, yes, I've been fully resourced. I've been fully funded to do everything. But I think we have had less pain and less impact than a lot of other verticals in the company. But, because there is such an awareness of the importance of what we do, but you can't protect fully forever. And with economic headwinds like what we're seeing, cybersecurity is going to see a hit. And I'm with you. It has been so easy to spend the CapEx money, deploy solutions, not necessarily fulfill the OpEx requirements to really fully utilize it.
Yes. Yep.
And, I think we can acknowledge that and say, well, probably that could have been managed a little better, but now let's look at the silver lining of that one and acknowledge, hey, this is probably something where we've got capabilities to do more. We just need to go uncover them and spend a little time figuring that out.
Yeah. So another big area of interest is the shift to leverage automation and orchestration and security. It's partially a way to manage kind of those vast amounts of data, right, that have to be analyzed, but perhaps even more so as an offset against a lack of experienced security staff, or as a way to offload more tactical tasks to staff, that you do have, freeing them to focus more on strategic issues. Any thoughts about this?
It's I agree with how you phrased it and how you described it fully. It is, I think there's really 2 different threads that are equally beneficial to a cybersecurity organization with the increase in automation. One is giving us the ability to do more with less.
Mm-hmm.
We know we're all going to take a few hits right now. Let's figure out how we can still continue to meet what we need to do when maybe we have a little less to work with. Automation's
Right.
a fabulous tool in this regard. And then also, I think we can look at automation right now and say, all right, we all know there's certain exposures we still wanted to fill. We all know of certain gaps in our enterprise strategy. We're probably not going to be able to fill those now with a bunch of extra funding.
Mm-hmm.
So let's look at how we fill those with automation. I think maybe we can even still broaden our scope and lessen that attack surface, but necessarily maybe not by throwing manpower at it, but instead focusing on what automation can do for us there.
Yeah, because automation can be such a key tool, I think, in that ability to be able to just take those things out of the hands of people that can really be mundane, right? We've talked about before the risk of having staff sitting around staring at a pane of glass 24/7 for 3 months, 6 months, a year. It's a great way to burn them out. But sometimes you see diminishing value or diminishing return in that value of those people just doing that over and over and over again. And when you can push some of that to be able to cook some of that information using automation orchestration can be a really valuable tool.
The ability to bring in automation as well into these normal security operations, I think, is a great arrow in the quiver to counteract attrition as well. We hire smart, great, really capable people in our organizations. And to think that they're going to be happy by doing these rote tasks day after day isn't realistic. So I believe it's not only making your operations better and broader, but really fulfilling the obligation we have to our organizations to continue to expose them to new areas, grow them, grow their skill sets. It really checks a lot of the boxes, I think, for what we need to be accomplishing.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we have time for one more issue to discuss, and I want to ask you about the digital user experience. Our users, particularly when they were in the office, were used to a very standard model of IT services delivery, right? I often refer to it as being like a dial tone, although I suppose that dating myself as more of our listeners cut the cord. But that being said, it's established an expectation for when users interact with technology. But as we shift the work model, that guarantee runs a risk of fraying around the edges. Right now, security's always played a role in protecting the user experience, but like a dial tone, it's often in the background and taken for granted. Pivot to a work from home model, and security can be a little more in your face. I'm constantly getting my multi-factor authentication requests 8 times a day, and if you know what I mean. How do we protect the user experience in a secure way, but without security getting in the way?
It's interesting to me that I think a lot of what we're seeing with, the effects we see of all of a sudden this total 180 change in how people work. This is bringing things that were going to come down the pipe anyway, but all of a sudden they came quicker, came overnight, and they all hit us at once, which in a way is a little bit of a benefit, because it avoids the frog in the boiling water solution, where we look around one day and go, wow, this traditional cybersecurity model is not working at all. We need to start over. There has been a tendency for a long time, and I'll use on-premise versus cloud R&D as an example, where there was a cybersecurity model for the traditional development environment. Well, development moved more and more into the cloud, but there was this real tendency to try to keep that old model and just say, oh, let's take that model, let's make it work in the cloud, instead of really looking at a cloud native model. I think now we have the chance to look at what's the remote native model, so to speak, and what are the important parts in that model. I think, really good solution selection is a big part of that model. I'll tie back a little bit earlier when I mentioned I lost a lot of my depth of defense in depth. I'm relying on my products to do more. I'm going to rely on my connected printer to do a lot more on security. I'm going to rely on my PC to do a lot more on security. At the same time, there is an aspect of security that has always been important, but I think is just exponentially now growing in importance compared to the rest, and it's identity. You mentioned, Bob, sitting around getting pinged by your MFA 8 times a day. That stuff's out there because we recognize identity is so critical. Because work is now not really a place you go. It's a thing you do.
Right.
And that, fundamental change in how authentication needs to work, how trust works. So I think we're really entering a several-year period of time where identity is really crucial. And that is a opportunity to innovate and find ways to do it with as little disruption as possible, because it's just not tenable to sit around and disrupt your employees all day long. We have to find some better ways.
Yeah, that's very good. Well, thanks, Joanna. It was great to catch up. And Tom, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you. Well, that's about all the time we have for today's webcast. I want to give a big thanks to our speakers, Joanna Burkey of HP and Bob Bragdon of IDG, for sharing their expertise and insights with us. And thanks especially to you, our viewers, for tuning in. Please be sure to check out the resources section on your console for links to some valuable HP resources. Also, if you have a question or comment about the webcast, just type it into the Q&A box in your console and press the submit button. We'll get back to you with an answer within a few days. For HP and IDG, I'm Tom Schmidt.